It was 6:30 in the morning when Rachel stirred from her thin mattress on the cold floor of the master bedroom. The walls, once painted in a soft ivory, were now stained with years of damp and neglect. The flat in East Manchester had once held dreams, now it only echoed commands and complaints. She padded barefoot across the kitchen tiles, careful not to make noise that would wake her mother-in-law. The old woman was a light sleeper and a heavy critic. Rachel poured cereal into a bowl for Michael, her 10-year-old son, who would never eat it without moaning. Just like his father. "Where's my toast?" came Edward's voice, sharp and impatient, before she could even put the kettle on. She moved quickly, mechanically, like a well-trained servant. No greeting. No thanks. Not even a glance. 10 years. 10 years of waking early, cooking every meal, cleaning the flat, attending school meetings, nursing Edward's flu, and even ironing his mother's clothes. Yet none of it had earned her a place in their hearts. Rachel was invisible. That morning, something inside her felt different. As she buttered the toast and laid it on a plate, she noticed her hands trembling, not with fear, but with clarity. Like a mist clearing. She watched Edward scroll through his phone at the dining table, not even lifting his eyes to meet hers. He didn't notice when she lingered a moment longer than usual by the door. He didn't ask why she hadn't eaten. He didn't care. Rachel slipped her phone into her coat pocket and stepped out into the drizzle. Her shift at the bakery didn't start for another hour, but she needed to be away from the walls that closed in like prison bars. She walked aimlessly at first, past rows of terraced houses, past closed cafes and misted windows. Her feet led her to the park where she once brought Michael to play, back when he still held her hand and called her, "Mummy," with love in his voice. There, she sat on a bench, watching the ducks glide across the grey water. For the first time in years, her heart beat a little louder than her fear. And then her phone buzzed. Daniel. A name she hadn't seen in almost 2 decades. She stared at the screen, breath caught in her throat. Daniel had been her best friend once, before life pulled them in different directions. Before she met Edward. Before she forgot who she was. She tapped to open the message. Back in the UK. Would love to catch up. Coffee? The wind tugged at her coat as if urging her forward. Rachel glanced towards the sky. The clouds above Manchester were beginning to break, just slightly, letting in a hint of blue. She stood up slowly, phone in hand, and walked away from the park bench. Away from the life that held her down. This time, something was about to change. Rachel walked slowly, her phone still warm in her palm from the message that had shaken her more than she expected. Daniel. A name she had locked away with 1,000 other memories, now slipped back into her life with nothing more than a few typed words. Back in the UK. Would love to catch up. Coffee? She read it again, as if the meaning would somehow change. But it didn't. It was him. She remembered Daniel not as the boy she used to laugh with during long walks home from school, nor the teen who once defended her when her father raised his voice. She remembered him as the only person who ever saw her. Not as a burden. Not as a servant. Just Rachel. But she wasn't that girl anymore. She looked down at her scuffed shoes, her coat that no longer kept out the cold, her hands that bore the marks of cleaning supplies and years of unpaid care. Her reflection in the cafe window showed dark circles, tired eyes, and a woman who had forgotten how to smile without rehearsing. She almost put the phone away. Almost. But instead, she replied. Tomorrow. 11. Wren Street Cafe. Her finger hovered before she hit send. Then she did. A soft whoosh. Too late to take it back. She tucked the phone away, her heart thumping as if she'd done something dangerous. And maybe she had. Because this message wasn't just about coffee. It was a threat to the past. A tug at something she had buried under years of obedience and routine. It was the start of something, even if she didn't know what. That evening, Rachel came home to the usual mess. Michael had left his trainers in the hallway again. Her mother-in-law's voice could be heard upstairs, complaining about a draft in the bedroom. Edward was asleep on the sofa, snoring softly, a half-empty beer bottle dangling from his hand. Rachel stepped over the shoes, picked up the coat that had been left crumpled on the floor, and walked into the kitchen. But her mind wasn't there. It was still at the park. Still on that bench. Still with Daniel. She set the kettle to boil and stared out of the small, greasy window above the sink. The rain had stopped. A single star peeked through the clouds. For a moment, it felt like the world had tilted slightly in her favor. Tomorrow. Just coffee, she told herself. But her heart whispered, or something more. Rachel arrived early. The Wren Street Cafe hadn't changed much. Still small. Still quiet. The kind of place people forgot unless they needed comfort. She chose a seat by the window, just far enough from the door to not seem eager. Her fingers toyed with the edge of a napkin as she waited. The bell above the entrance jingled. She looked up. There he was. Daniel Harrington. Taller than she remembered. His hair, still dark but now brushed with streaks of grey at the temples. A calm confidence in his stride, but his eyes were the same. Kind. Observant. And when they landed on her, they softened even more. Rachel, he said, smiling. She stood. Hesitated. Then allowed a brief, awkward hug. They Saturday. Ordered coffee. No sugar, just like old times. Married? He asked gently. She nodded. 10 years. His gaze lingered on her expression, noticing the pause after the words. Anne, how is it? Rachel traced a finger along the rim of her cup. Busy. He chuckled softly. You always were better at dodging questions than answering them. A small smile. Then, silence. But not empty. Full. Heavy with what wasn't said. Daniel finally broke it. I heard about your father. After I moved away, I kept wondering how you were. I wanted to write, call. But time, life. I know, Rachel whispered. It's all right. But it wasn't. Not really. And Daniel knew it. He leaned forward. You used to say you wanted to open a bookshop. One with a cafe in the back and a shelf just for poetry no one reads. You said you'd name it The Quiet Corner. Rachel laughed, softly. The memory was warm. Bittersweet. I forgot I even said that. I didn't. His tone dropped. I never forgot you, Rachel. A blush crept into her cheeks before she could stop it. She looked down at her hands. I'm not that girl anymore, she murmured. I can see that. He paused. But she's still in there. For a moment, the world outside faded. The noise, the weight, the years, gone. She saw herself through his eyes. Not the tired wife. Not the invisible woman. Just Rachel. The girl with dreams. The woman who mattered. But reality tugged at her sleeve like a child refusing to be ignored. Her phone buzzed. Edward. She didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she looked at Daniel and asked the question she hadn't dared ask anyone in years. Why did you really come back? He hesitated. And in his hesitation, something shifted. I came back, he said slowly, because I realized some things shouldn't be left behind. Not forever. Their eyes locked. And the silence that followed was no longer awkward. It was promise. Rachel stood in the kitchen, holding a cake box with trembling fingers. The bakery had written, Happy Birthday, Mum, in delicate cream letters on top. No one had asked what message to write, she had told them herself. Even if no one else remembered. It was her birthday. Again. And no one said a word. Edward had left early that morning, muttering something about meetings in Manchester. The twins, Alex and Amelia, were caught up in their phones, their games, their endless scroll. No hug. No card. Not even a passing wish. She placed the cake on the kitchen counter and stared at it. The silence around her felt too loud. 12 hours later, the cake was still untouched. The candles lay unopened in their plastic packet, bought by herself, just in case. Always just in case. Rachel slipped outside, wrapping her coat tight against the cold evening air. She walked without thinking, her feet leading her to the green, a quiet park down the lane where mothers once pushed prams and children ran through leaves. It was deserted now. Just trees, wind, and the faint sound of traffic in the distance. She sat on a bench beneath the old sycamore and closed her eyes. This was the first year she didn't cry. She was beyond crying. She felt hollow. Then, her phone vibrated. Message from Daniel. Happy birthday. I hope today reminded you of who you really are. Not just who they see. Let me know if you're up for that poetry reading next week. Her eyes widened. How did he remember? She opened her mouth to laugh, but it came out choked. Not from sadness. From the strange comfort of being remembered. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. She wanted to reply, wanted to say yes, but something held her back. Was it guilt? Or fear? Before she could decide, the screen lit up again. New message from Edward. Dinner will be late. Don't wait up. No apology. No mention. No clue what today meant. She stared at the two messages. One cold. Dismissive. Distant. The other simple. Warm. Kind. A gust of wind brushed against her cheek like a whisper. She stood and began to walk again. This time, not aimlessly. She didn't go home straight away. She turned left at the end of the park, heading towards the town center. Past the florist that closed too early, the charity shop with old toys in the window, and finally, into a dimly lit corner of the high street where the hidden chapter stood, a small, aging bookshop with crooked shelves and dusty poetry books. It was closed, of course. But Rachel just stood there. Staring at the sign. Imagining. What if? What if this had been her world? What if she'd said yes instead of always later? What if she was more than a wife no one celebrated? She closed her eyes and whispered, I remember her too. And for the first time in a long while, she meant herself. Rain tapped gently against the windowpane, a soft rhythm in an otherwise silent house. Rachel sat alone in the study, a cup of untouched tea cooling beside her. Her eyes drifted to the drawer in Edward's old desk, the one she had never opened. Not because she wasn't allowed. But because, somewhere deep down, she had never wanted to know what lay inside. Until now. Her fingers hovered for a moment, then pulled the handle slowly. The drawer creaked open with quiet resistance. Inside was a stack of old documents, bills, statements, tax letters. All expected. All lifeless. Until she saw it. A faded envelope, cream-colored and slightly crumpled, tucked beneath a pile of bank statements. Her name written in Edward's precise, formal handwriting. She opened it with care. The letter was dated 5 years ago. The words were stiff. Measured. As if every sentence had been weighed before being allowed to exist. Rachel. If you're reading this, it's because I never had the courage to tell you. Or perhaps, because too much time has passed and silence has become our habit. She blinked. I know I've become someone you no longer recognize. And yet, I have watched you for years, wondering how I ended up so far from the woman I once begged to marry me. Her breath caught. You were never just a mother. Never just a wife. But I treated you as if those roles defined you. I took and forgot to give back. And still, you stayed. That's what hurts the most, Rachel. You stayed. The words blurred slightly as her eyes welled up, but she kept reading. Sometimes I wonder if I failed you because I failed myself first. I became the man my father warned me not to be. Distant. Unreachable. Cold. I never wanted you to feel invisible, but I see now, that's exactly what you became. She clutched the page. There's no excuse for it. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope that, one day, you will wake up and remember who you were before me. There was no signature. No closing. Just silence. Rachel folded the letter slowly and placed it back in the envelope. Her hands shook, not from pain, but from something else. Recognition. She rose from the chair and walked into the bedroom. The wardrobe loomed before her, still packed with clothes that no longer felt like hers. She reached up, pulled down an old box she hadn't touched in years. Inside were fragments of her old life. Sketches from university. A cracked CD of her favorite band from her teenage years. A notebook filled with scribbled poetry. A copy of Jane Eyre with underlined passages, angry and passionate. She held it all like a secret she had forgotten she owned. Rachel sat on the floor, surrounded by memories, the letter beside her, the rain outside now a steady drumbeat. Something in her had shifted. A door inside her had creaked open, just like the drawer. And for the first time in a decade, she let herself feel it. She was more than what this house had made her. She was Rachel. And Rachel still existed. The light was beginning to fade. The amber glow of the late afternoon sun spilled through the windows, casting long shadows on the wooden floor of the sitting room. Rachel sat by the fireplace, the letter from Edward now tucked safely into the pages of Jane Eyre, resting on the coffee table. Her thoughts drifted. To the years lost in silence. To the woman she had once been. To the man she had once loved. The crackling of the fire was the only sound, until a knock at the front door. Not urgent. Not hesitant. Just deliberate. Rachel stood slowly. Her fingers brushed against the edge of the table as she steadied herself, the air around her suddenly tense. She wasn't expecting anyone. Not today. Not at this hour. When she opened the door, her heart stumbled. Standing before her was a woman, mid-50s, perhaps. Polished, well-dressed, with sharp eyes and a subtle scent of expensive perfume. Her coat was tailored. Her lipstick, immaculate. A woman who did not knock on doors at random. Rachel Edwards. Rachel hesitated. Yes. I'm Harriet Langford. Edward's solicitor. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. I thought everything had been finalized. The house, the accounts. Harriet gave a small, professional smile. There's something that didn't come through probate. Something personal. May I come in? Rachel stepped aside, unsure, watching Harriet scan the room with the quick efficiency of someone used to uncovering secrets. Harriet sat down with the grace of someone who belonged in every room she entered. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a small black notebook. Worn. Leather-bound. This, she said, placing it on the table, was found among Edward's private belongings. It's not an official record. More of a journal. Or a confession. Rachel's hand hovered above it but didn't touch. Harriet continued, her voice even. He never intended to leave this to you formally. But when I read the contents, I believed you had every right to see it. Rachel opened the cover slowly. Her own name stared back at her. Every page was written in Edward's hand. Some hurried. others neat. Some pages stained with what looked like spilt tea or tears. She began to read. She looks through me now. Like I'm furniture. Like the air. I built this house for her. But I filled it with silence. Sometimes I hear her crying in the shower. And I pretend not to. Because I'm afraid of what I might have caused. Rachel's fingers trembled. Harriet sat still, watching her. Page after page, the words painted a different Edward. Not the one she had known in the past few years. But the one from before, the one who had tried, failed, and known it. I thought keeping her in comfort would keep her happy. I didn't realize she needed more than a warm house. She needed a partner. I became her prison. A long silence fell between the women. Then Harriet said, softly, there's more. It's not just guilt. She pulled out a small key from her coat pocket. This was hidden behind a false panel in his wardrobe. He left no instructions. But I believe it unlocks something he never had the courage to show you. Rachel stared at the key. Its cold silver shimmered faintly in the firelight. She took it. Wordlessly. And knew, somehow, that her past was not yet finished speaking. That somewhere in this house was one final truth. And perhaps, her last tether to the man she thought she had lost long ago. The key was small. Cold. Almost delicate. Rachel held it in her palm, her fingers curled around it tightly as she moved through the quiet corridors of the house she thought she knew. Every creak of the floorboards under her steps felt louder tonight. Every corner held a shadow she hadn't noticed before. She paused outside Edward's old study. The door hadn't been opened since the day of the funeral. The silence beyond it was thick, like a secret waiting to exhale. With a deep breath, she turned the handle. Dust floated in the golden light spilling through the tall windows. His desk remained untouched. Papers stacked in neat piles. Pens still aligned. A jacket draped over the back of the leather chair, as though he might return at any moment. Rachel walked to the wardrobe along the far wall. It was built into the paneling, sturdy oak with brass handles. She opened it slowly. Inside hung only a single coat and a pair of Edward's shoes, polished, perfectly placed. But behind the lining, she noticed a faint outline. A seam where the wood didn't quite meet. With trembling hands, she pressed her fingers along the edge. Click. A small square panel slid open, revealing a lock. She inserted the key. It turned with a soft snick, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow staircase, spiraling down into darkness. Rachel hesitated, her breath catching. Then she stepped in. The air was cool. Old. Filled with the scent of time itself. She descended slowly, the key still in her grip like a talisman. At the bottom was a room, hidden deep beneath the house. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a pale light over a space filled with boxes, files, and a single workbench. On the wall were pinned dozens of photos. Rachel's eyes widened. Photos of her. Of them. From the early days. Their wedding. Her first birthday as his wife. Laughing in the garden. Sitting on the windowsill reading. And then, photos she didn't know had ever been taken. Her asleep on the sofa. Her in the kitchen, wiping a tear from her cheek. Her standing alone in the hallway, holding a letter. Her expression, empty. Rachel's throat tightened. Edward had been watching her. Capturing her pain. Quietly. Obsessively. But why? She moved to the table. There was a large notebook. She opened it and found pages and pages of sketches, floor plans, blueprints, drafts. At first, she didn't understand. Then she saw the title scrawled at the top of one, Her New Home. A second chance. Below it, a layout. A house. Similar, but brighter. More open. With her favorite reading nook. A sunroom. A kitchen with her dream stove. Each room labeled in Edward's handwriting. Rachel's haven. Rachel's peace. Rachel's choice. Tears blurred her vision. He had been building this. Secretly. Planning. Hoping. Trying, in his own fractured way, to undo the years of silence. But he never showed her. He never dared. And now he was gone. Rachel stepped back, staring at the walls of memories, the sketches, the proof of a love he never knew how to express aloud. Then something on the bench caught her eye. A small velvet box. She opened it. Inside was a ring. Not her wedding band. A new one. Simple. Elegant. Etched inside were 4 words. If I could start again. Rachel pressed the ring to her lips. No sobs. Just silence. The kind that says everything. And as she stood alone in the hidden room beneath the house, she understood. This was Edward's confession. His apology. His final, silent gift. The following morning arrived quietly, as if the world itself knew something had shifted. Rachel stood at the edge of the garden, the frost melting beneath her bare feet. She watched the sky slowly turn from grey to gold, the way it had on the day they first moved in. But now, every blade of grass, every petal, every breath felt different. Felt hers. Inside the house, the silence no longer felt like a stranger. It felt like space. Space to choose. Space to feel. She spent the next few days in a blur of motion and stillness. Sorting. Touching. Letting go. She moved through each room with intention. Removing remnants that no longer belonged. Preserving the few that did. The hidden room below, once haunting, now felt like a secret she had shared. A final piece of a puzzle she had never meant to complete, yet now could finally see whole. The ring never left her finger. Not as a promise to Edward. But as a vow to herself. That she would never again forget who she was. That she would never again let love mean silence. By the end of the week, Rachel had made a decision. She called a solicitor and put the house up for sale. When the agent asked why she was leaving such a beautiful place, she simply said, "Because it's not where I belong anymore." She found a small cottage on the coast. Wind-swept. A little wild. Nothing like the grand home she had lived in, but everything she now needed. A place with sea air and open windows and uneven floorboards. A place that breathed. She took only what mattered. A few photographs. Her books. Her favorite mug. And the sketches from the hidden room. Especially the one marked Rachel's piece. She hung it on the wall in the new sitting room, next to a window that looked out onto the endless waves. She lit a candle beneath it every night, not as a shrine, but as a reminder. Of the past. Of the quiet pain she survived. Of the quiet strength she reclaimed. And of the man who couldn't change in time, but tried, in the end, in the only way he knew. The wind carried his name sometimes. Edward. But it no longer cut through her. It just passed gently by. Rachel smiled more. She sang when she cooked. She started writing again. Little things. Memories. Moments. Pieces of herself she'd stored away for a rainy day that never seemed to come, until now. And slowly, the world widened. She joined a book club in the village hall. She walked barefoot along the pebbled shore. She started laughing again. Not the polite kind. Real, full, belly-deep laughter. And one day, she opened her front door to find a letter. No name. No address. Just a piece of paper folded neatly in half. Inside, in delicate handwriting, it read, You are the light I never earned. But I hope you shine, wherever you are. No signature. But Rachel knew. She folded the letter gently, tucked it behind the sketch on the wall, and whispered a quiet goodbye. Not a goodbye to him, but to the woman she had been. And with the wind rushing through the open window, she stepped into the light. Not someone's wife. Not someone's shadow. But Rachel. Whole. And finally free.